When I was a kid, I drew all over the wall with the marker. I'm sure I had a good reason, although it escapes me now. But I did realize that I was gonna get in a ton of trouble, and so I hit on the perfect alibi. The Easter Bunny did it. That was airtight. You can't poke holes in that. No one knows where the Easter Bunny is. Problem was, my parents didn't believe in the Easter Bunny anymore. I was busted. I learned a hard lesson that day about the nature of magic. Now, sadly, I'm an adult, and I envy my younger self, the one who believed in magic. Did the wrinkles and gray hair grow an inverse relationship to wonder? So what does the Easter Bunny have to do with the Bermuda Triangle? We miss that wonder. We long for a world with magic in it. So here I am on the edge of a boat in the Bermuda Triangle, and I'm hosting a TV show about curses. So maybe all hope isn't lost. There's a desire to believe in something beyond our understanding. Can a science-minded skeptic like myself reignite the spark of magic? Is there an intersection point between science and myth? Wait, what was that? Dude, that was a shark, man. Oh, there he goes. There goes the genius. I used to be a professional sailor, and at some point, I've crossed most of the world's oceans on various sailboats. And I've seen some pretty strange things.
Cheers, guys.
If you want to hear some stories, just mix sailors and alcohol, and you'll turn on a spigot you wish you could stop.
Who's got like a good Bermuda Triangle story?
One time we went out with a sonar, placed it at the bottom of the ocean, and something sent a magnetic field back up. But they said it was like almost 100 feet in the ground.
Deep underneath it.
Yeah.
It's probably Godzilla.
They also have the vortex around here too, right?
Yeah.
What's the vortex?
It's a spot where all the instruments go crazy and it's like a portal to another dimension or something.
Have you guys seen anything like that on here? Like weird?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's no way to...
Sometimes you see a light, it'll be right there, and then...
I mean, you guys all know Steve Knowles, right? Like his story about they were doing like 40 knots or so. You had 3 or 4 guys on the boat. One green light came screaming up behind the boat, and then it came around to the side of the boat. They're still doing 40 knots. Lit up the whole side of the boat, and then he took off like a rocket from it.
Yeah, that's a crazy one.
Yeah.
That was the Bermuda Triangle.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
The story what everybody know, probably the Flight 19.
What do you guys think happened to Flight 19?
You know, the squadron of 5 plane that does this every day, and then this one day it just disappears, you know?
Yeah.
A search plane went out and also went missing.
Right.
And that was a seaplane, yeah.
Why wouldn't a seaplane be able to land?
Yeah.
Crash it.
Right.
So it's all a mystery.
The story of the Bermuda Triangle really has 3 chapters: plane crashes, shipwrecks, and the mysterious disappearances of entire crews. We call those ghost ships. But are any of these chapters truly anomalous? Is the Bermuda Triangle more dangerous than the rest of the world's oceans? We'll analyze the planet's most infamous curse with a skeptical forensic mind.
So here it is. This is it. This is the Bermuda Triangle. You know, Florida, Bermuda to Puerto Rico. You know, it's about 500,000 square miles.
The fact is, there have been countless incidents, millions, on the world's oceans since the first seafaring people set out, nearly 50,000 years ago. Most of these are easy to explain. You know, bad weather, human error, faulty equipment. The ocean's a big, bad place. But I'm interested in the events here that have some mystery surrounding them, where it's harder to put your finger on the cause. So I've hand-selected some of the most cryptic occurrences and created incident maps of the areas surrounding the Bermuda Triangle.
You can see there's hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks and plane crashes. This cluster here has got to be Flight 19.
The disappearance of Flight 19 is the foundation of the Bermuda Triangle legend. In early December in 1945, 5 Navy planes took off from Florida on a training mission with 14 men on board. Those planes, the infamous Flight 19, disappeared without a trace. But then one of the rescue planes that goes looking for them also completely vanishes. And now you have the seeds for a mystery. 300 boats and planes searched the water for 5 days. Not one shred of wreckage was ever found. This concrete shipwreck off the coast of Bimini is the last witness to the missing planes. While it can't tell its story in words, I'd love to find some shrapnel of evidence of what happened to Flight 19. Something to ease my skeptic mind and keep the hope for a magical world alive. As lovely as this location is, as lucid and clean the water, I can't help but think of the 27 young men who flew over this stretch of unforgiving ocean and vanished forever in the darkness of the coming night. All those families ripped apart, children left behind without ever knowing what happened, without closure, without understanding. Did those young men fall victim to a mysterious geophysical curse? What happened out there in the darkness?
This is actually the lead ship of Flight 19.
Wow, the exact same plane as this is Flight 19.
Yes.
The final words of the men on Flight 19 have been studied and pored over. Every sentence and word analyzed in depth by the Navy's after-action report. And then, of course, reanalyzed by armchair historians and hacky, cursed TV shows.
Walk me through what happened to Flight 19. What's the deal?
It was a training flight for navigation training, believe it or not.
So we just got back from the Sapona, which we dove on. That was their target. So we know they dropped their bombs on the Sapona.
Correct.
What was their path after that?
Due east.
Due east.
For another 60, 70 miles.
Okay.
Then make a turn to the north-northwest.
What happened?
It's a big mystery to this day.
Right.
Nobody knows exactly what happened to them.
Nobody knows, but there are theories. Colleen Sterling is the LeBron James of aviation probability analysis. You maybe didn't know there was a LeBron James of that. After 2 years of searching for Air France Flight 447, Colleen was brought in as part of a small team to reanalyze the data. They found the wreckage in less than 5 days.
The first thing we did is looked at the 500-page Navy report that came out, the communications, all the radar hits that they had, and we wrote a chronology. The key transmissions, everything is map-based, right?
Right.
So I'll put like where they launched from and the time, and then I'll draw the line where they were supposed to go, and then I can calculate with the wind and their heading how long it should have taken them to get to their first turn point. I thought about that first turn point, and then I said, well, where could they have gone from there? They were trying to go back to the northwest, but the wind was blowing them, and they may have not made the turn sharp enough and might have got significantly blown to a different heading.
Powers, what is your compass reading, Powers? I don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost after that last turn. MT-28, this is FT-74. What is your trouble? Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
So this is the compass here.
That's the magnetic
That's
compass.
the magnetic compass. So he would be looking at this. What else would he
He
be
would look
looking
at that, and then hit down on his instrument panel. You have what's called the gyro compass here, that you set this with this knob to agree with this.
To agree with
This
it,
bounces
to-
around.
Sure.
That one is very stable.
Taylor, who was the flight lead, was talking about the compass didn't look right. He started to get confused.
Don't they know they have to get back?
Taylor thought that they needed to fly to the northeast because he thought they were over the Florida Keys.
How did he think he
It's very hard to imagine him getting that lost. He doesn't seem to have his wits about him on this flight. And you hear them arguing on the radio. It's really sad.
Right.
We've just passed over a small island and we have no other land in sight. Turn on your emergency IFF gear, or do you have it on? IFF gear was off. I'm turning it on now.
What's ISF gear?
IFF, that's an acronym for identification, friend, or foe.
Okay.
Right here, for example, see this says 1200. In an IFF, they would have given them a code to squawk.
To put
In there, and they would be picked up on their radar.
He didn't have it on.
He didn't have it on.
Should he have had it on?
Especially if I want help in finding out where I am.
Right.
FT-28 to Nanhao Able 3. One of the planes in the flight thinks if we went 270 degrees, we could hit land.
270, that's due west.
That's somebody with a decent compass, or somebody else is like, hey, we just go 270, we're gonna hit land.
Just to get to their bombing target, they flew due east.
Right.
Well, just fly due west and then take it back where it came from.
Right. We'll hit land some point.
Yeah.
FT-28, all planes in flight. Change course to 090 for 1 minute.
So now they're going
back east again.
Back east again.
Damn it, if we just fly west, we would get home. Hold it. Head west. Damn it.
Powers, who is the ranking guy on the flight, he kept saying we need to go west.
Right.
And then it gets corroborated with a radar track that came from the Solomons aircraft carrier.
And where did that see them?
The radar track showed aircraft going south. Over land. There's a good chance that it could be somewhere in this mid-peninsula, east coast of Florida region.
So that wouldn't surprise you at all?
No, the model supports that.
Wow.
We are now flying 270 degrees. We will fly 270 degrees until we hit the beach or run out of gas.
And now they know they're in trouble because it's like, they're going to run out of gas.
Yeah, and they just don't have a clue where they are.
When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. Does everyone understand that?
In December of 1945, 5 planes flown by Navy pilots vanished into the night. Then, one of the rescue planes that went after them suffered the same fate. Collectively, the strange event is known as Flight 19.
We've just passed over a small island and we have no other land in sight.
It's the single biggest event that gave the Cursed Triangle its name. But here's a question. What if the planes didn't really go down inside the Bermuda Triangle? Does the curse dissolve into thin air?
When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. Does everyone understand that?
There's a good chance that it could be somewhere in this mid-peninsula, east coast of Florida region. They actually could have made it back and started heading south in the time that they had before they ran out of fuel.
Wow. For 70 years, this disappearance gripped the imagination, and people assumed it crashed at sea. And what this model is showing me is there's this whole other search area that no one's even looked at.
There are still corners of Florida that nobody's been in because it's inaccessible for one reason or another.
I don't usually follow up on leads when they involve like some dude who heard something from another guy who may or may not have seen something. But Colleen's identified a search zone near a turtle preserve in central Florida. And there just happens to be a guy with a story about a crashed airplane.
How do you know that this is the plane we're looking for of Flight 19?
Well, John Meyer, one of the leading researchers for Flight 19, his theory was that the 5 airplanes separated at some point in time off the eastern coast of Florida when they were trying to find land.
Right, when they got real low on fuel.
Right, and John thought that FT-81 actually made it back over land.
Right.
And the diagram that he drew, based on his theory, put FT-81 in this particular area of Florida at about the time it ran out of gas.
Really?
So we've been out here looking for this particular wreck site for a while because we've been out here tromping around in basically Everglades type of conditions.
As horrific and sad as it sounds, planes crash all the time. If we find out where any part of Flight 19 actually went down, well, then the planes didn't disappear at all. and definitely not in the Bermuda Triangle, and they're just part of a tragic list with thousands and thousands of other entries.
When John passed away, we're not really sure what happened to his notes, and we had Hurricane Dorian this fall, and it really flooded the area. Without John's notes, we're looking for the proverbial needle in the haystack, but we're not even sure which haystack to look in.
With Colleen Sterling confirming this area as the most likely location that Flight 19 went down, we decided to bring in some technology to speed up the search.
So this is a LiDAR drone. What does that mean?
So it is a multi-rotor quadcopter, and it has a LiDAR unit on it.
Right.
Basically the same principle as a policeman with a speed gun. Shoots out a laser, hits something solid, the return comes back, and then it highly accurately marks those points. Millions of points of rotation, thousands of rotations a second. When it's all said and done, Mike, he'll filter it out so we can actually get the vegetation away and look for the impressions.
Great. Yeah. Well, let's get it done.
Arming the props. All right, taking off.
Since we have that high level of accuracy, all of those like bottom points, we're going to be really highly confident that those are actually ground. That's what's going to, allow us to give you guys an awesome representation of this landscape as if we had just, burned all the vegetation down. So, basically what we're looking for is artificial features. Right down in here is a nice little cross. See this impression here that creates this line? It's pretty darn straight. And then you have another one right here. It's very unusual for a natural feature to have such pretty geometry, right? I think this is the best place to look for this wreck.
All right.
Straight ahead here. Just head a little bit left. We should be getting pretty close. There's a break in the weeds right there.
There's something here.
What you got?
Something burned up. Oh, yeah. That's it, man.
There we go.
Right? That's got to be it.
That's got to be it. Look. That would have been attached to the back of an engine. There's the tire.
Cool.
It came in pretty steep. There's all kinds of debris in there. That would have been the IFF unit, the friend or foe unit.
Oh, okay, yeah.
IFF gear was off. I'm turning it on now.
What will be the next step for you?
The rest of the airplane is probably buried. What we're looking for is a data plate on the front of the engine. But to dig in the wildlife management area, we have to have a separate permit to do that. But it is something that we can come back and do.
While we need a serial number to say if this World War II era wreck is one of the planes from Flight 19, there's a chance at least one of them is not lost in the Bermuda Triangle at all.
This could be FT-81.
Which would mean some of them at least made it back to land.
Right.
The truth is, the psychological grip of the Bermuda Triangle's curse extends well beyond 6 missing planes. So while Nate works on digging out the engine block,
yeah, I wouldn't want to be the one to dig. I was hoping you could do it.
My investigation moves to phase 2, ghost ships. There comes a time in everyone's life where you find yourself sitting in a dark room at 3 a.m., half-eaten turkey sandwich, typing Bermuda Triangle mysteries into the search engine. What you tend to find are long lists of disappearances, ships and planes vanishing. And there's a list of theories that goes along with it. Magnetic fields, mermaids, gigantic undersea methane bubbles. But it goes way out to alien wormholes and time vortices, Atlantis, where they sucked under by the Kraken. Now, some of these theories are fairly bonkers, but others, they seem pretty plausible. And then sometimes you find something that does seem real and fascinating and truly inexplicable. Something that on the surface defies any rational explanation.
Here's maybe the most interesting incident map. This is ghost ships. So ghost ships were ships that are just floating, drifting in the ocean with nobody on them. And this is from the US Hydrographic Survey. They documented 1,600 ghost ships. Yeah, there's something very sort of eerie and terrifying and this idea of 1,600 ships out here, and you know, you don't know what happened to the crew. I mean, where did everybody go, or where are the bodies? How this is happening.
During a 7-year survey starting in 1887, the U.S. Hydrographic Office found the existence of 1,600 ships floating at sea without a single soul on board. 1,600 floating ships and 0 sailors. That math seems off. Now, I'm not saying that it's not aliens, because it could be. But let's see how a scientist who studies the world's oceans explains it.
They call this area the doldrums.
The doldrums.
The atmospheric circulation starts with a lot of warm, moist air rising from the Pacific and the tropical area. And once it reaches high altitudes, it starts heading toward the poles. And at a certain latitude, which is in this area, the air starts sinking.
Yeah.
And associated with them is very little wind. So pre-19th century, all the ships were sails.
Right.
So these sailboats required wind to move.
Right. So it just sort of sits there.
And it just sits there. But other things like large mats of sargassum weed, which are less buoyant than water, they float. You had these mats of sargassum weed that you just literally got stuck in. Big mats, 100 yards wide and almost a mile long.
Wow.
You're stuck.
Yeah, you imagine 6 weeks of it or 7 weeks of it running out of water.
And you're hoping for some winds, you're hoping to find some current.
Yeah, you're hoping for something to blow, right? Wow. I can't imagine anything creepier than running into a ship
in the middle of nowhere
with nobody on it. What's your theory? Why would all these boats end up empty?
There are some people out there that believe aliens are involved.
Sure.
But, you know, I'm a scientist. I'm waiting to see the first true documented case of the alien abduction.
Right.
But they do have these ocean vortices. If you got caught in those, you go, oh, great. I'm finally in some decent current. But they spin around in the order of 9-10 days. They basically bring you back to the same location.
Which would be tough if you're running out of water.
And as you know, if you drink salt water over time, it makes you a little crazy.
Yeah.
You get dehydrated.
You hallucinate, things like that. Yeah.
And that, you know, it helps to add to all the great legends.
Right.
About mermaids and monsters and maelstroms and
the Bermuda Triangle, right?
And the Bermuda Triangle.
You can sort of imagine the mariners out here during the age of sail being stuck. And I think that's why sailors get so superstitious, because they have so little control over the weather and so many things. So, you know, you never sail on a Friday. You gotta be careful whistling on a boat because you can whistle up a breeze. You know, there's a trillion sailor superstitions, and it probably comes from a sense of powerlessness and being trapped. We were in Hamilton Harbor in Bermuda, and I was anchored there in an 85-foot steel ketch. The tail end of a hurricane came through. And we heard on the radio 6 vessels, you know, calling for help, abandoning ship. These were inexperienced sailors, and to them it felt like the world was ending and water's coming in, and, you know, it's intense. You could hear on the radio fear just warping their perception and putting them in a bad spot where, you know, if they'd been through it one time, if they'd lived through it one time, they would have known they're going to survive it and that their other options are worse. So many times, you know, these vessels turn up floating and the crew died, and they could have stayed and they would have been wet and miserable, but they would have lived.
Listen, inexperienced sailors make mistakes, but for that to be replicated 1,600 times? Come on, that's a mystery. Humans are a complex animal, and there's a lot of variation within our species. If you walk down the street and go into a bar or a grocery store, everybody acts different. Some people are loud, some are quiet, some walk fast, some walk slow. But if something scary happens, then boom, in the face of fear, instincts kick in, and we all move in unison. But is that enough to explain how 1,600 crews of stranded sailors all repeated the exact same behavior, time after time after time? Dr. George Everly wrote the book on the human stress response. And you know what's super stressful? Abandoning ship.
What would cause a seasoned professional, a professional sailor,
Right.
to lose rationality and abandon ship? Now, we do know extreme stress does allow a part of the brain to hijack your more rational centers. There's a part of the brain called the amygdala.
Yes.
And the amygdala is the home of what we sometimes call the fight or flight response.
Right.
Every once in a while, the amygdala can hijack executive functions. It overrides it, if you will.
Okay.
So we begin to do irrational things, and it begins mildly irrational. If I can drink some salt water, maybe it'll buy me enough time for maybe a miracle. The brain is concerned about survival. It could lead one to do anything in a moment of desperation. I'm dry, that's wet, I'll try it out. So going overboard seems like a really good idea.
Right.
Until you go overboard and find out it's not.
Your kidneys can only handle so much salt in your diet, and salt water from the ocean has 4 times that amount. So drinking salt water basically starts a doomsday clock in your body. The minute you take your first sip, you start dying.
The Marine Corps came up with condition black, the catastrophic failure of your cognitive abilities because of stress. You know, the classic line from The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. It was a real thing. I think dehydration plays a bigger role. As dehydration gets into people, they start drinking salt water, and eventually they start getting off the boat.
To me, the ghost ships aren't some sort of symptom of a cursed Bermuda Triangle. It's a weather pattern that causes ships to get stuck. And then human instinct causes people to make bad decisions. It's the perfect storm, repeating over and over. Maybe the real mystery isn't some dark external force, but something inside of our own minds. Maybe we're a species of mammal that was never meant to be on the ocean at all. Weird stuff has been happening in the Bermuda Triangle for a long time. Some people think it goes all the way back to Christopher Columbus, who saw strange lights in the sky, and he later lost his flagship to Santa Maria. In the 5 centuries since, countless other ships have vanished in this 500,000 square mile stretch of ocean. But is there really something supernatural happening here? Or is the open ocean just a dangerous place to be?
I'd really like to get into some of these shipwrecks. I'm curious as to whether we can find, you know, some kind of root cause for this pattern of shipwrecks. You know, it could be currents, it could be shallow water in here. This is all the Bahamas, and there's a ton of huge sections of 1 foot, 2 foot sandbanks and all kinds of reefs that aren't even marked today. And some of that might be the explanation, but I think we need to dig a little deeper.
An estimated 3 million shipwrecks litter the ocean bottom, and less than 1% have ever been explored. There are logical explanations for the wrecks around Bermuda, the knife-edge reefs, the high traffic, even hurricanes. But most armchair Bermuda Triangle experts will point to the more mysterious events, like the disappearance of the USS Cyclops. The Cyclops is to shipwrecks what Flight 19 is to plane crashes. In March of 1918, the last transmission the ship sent on its way through the Triangle gave the impression of bright sunny skies, fair weather. And then she disappeared without a trace. No distress call, no sign of wreckage. 309 men vanished.
What do the conditions down there look like?
They're good. I mean, you can definitely see it's definitely snapped in half. There's half of a wreck sitting right on the bottom. It's the stern portion of it. There was a shipping boat that went down in the early 90s.
It's not the Cyclops, but Neil found a much more recent wreck that may offer a clue. A ship that appears to be snapped in half.
You said it was the tail end of Hurricane Andrew?
It was shortly after the hurricane.
They didn't hit
were bringing
anything out
supplies.
here.
And there's nothing to hit out here.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened?
Yeah, who knows?
It took a little while for us to find it, but we fixed a mooring on it and just a temporary chain and line that will follow down.
So if I don't make it back, tell my mom I love her, okay, you guys? Thanks.
I have your Barnays.
Yes. No.
No, come on.
No. None of you get my Barnays.
You can see it's cut right in half. This is a really clean split. It's like it's sheared off. Hard to imagine what was sheared like that. Bermuda just has thousands of wrecks like this. This wreck went down very unexpectedly. Nobody knows quite what happened because something broke the ship's back very here.
I can understand how bad weather can make a ship capsize, or a torpedo or boiler room explosion could knock a hole in the side. But to crack so cleanly in half, how would that happen? And could this be a clue as to how the Cyclops and so many other ships have been lost? Tim Jansen is a physical oceanographer, and he has a scientific theory that might explain all these sudden disappearances. It's something I'd heard rumors about when I was sailing around the world in my 20s. The terrifying rogue wave.
What's your definition of a rogue wave?
The general definition everybody understands, it's a very, very big wave. Right. And then there's a sort of like scientific version of that, which doesn't like big or large because it's not very precise. Okay. So you measure for a while, you pick the highest 1/3 of the waves, you average that number, and that's the significant wave height. A wave that is twice as big as that, that's formally called a rogue wave. Right. So the Droppner wave was the first time that we actually measured a wave that was qualifying as a literal rogue wave, like, 2 times the significant wave height in an already very large wave field.
Where was it? What was
This was in off the coast of Norway, in the North Sea.
When was that?
This was 1995.
So pretty recently, like they've only had a real scientific proof of any of this. Totally. 95.
For centuries, the scientific community wrote off the concept of rogue waves as just tall tales told by drunken sailors, exaggerations that are unreliable. Then in the mid-90s, the Droppner oil platform was being battered by some run-of-the-mill 40-foot waves when a monster came out of nowhere. Nearly 90 feet tall, a rogue wave smashed into the Droppner oil platform. Recently, a NASA study determined that at any given time, there are as many as 10 rogue waves happening in the world's oceans.
Most people were sort of like discarding that as sort of like, mermaid type stories. Right. A rogue wave is rare, but it's not impossible. Like, 3 in 10,000. Right. A 100-foot wave, we see them all the time.
Really?
When I got out of college, I was at a loss. I didn't have a plan. But then an old family friend offered me a job fixing up a yacht and then sailing it around the world. I mean, he was gonna pay me. Well, I knew that opportunity could never come again. So I kept my mouth shut, and he never realized how clueless I was, and I took the job. 3.5 years on the ocean will teach you a lot. But luckily, during all that time, we never hit one of these.
A rogue wave is rare, but it's not impossible. Like, 3 in 10,000. Right. A 100-foot wave, we see them all the time.
Really?
Now, I've never myself as an adult, but if I was sailing along and I looked up into the shadow of an 8-story high wave, that might be the time.
If you have a significant wave height of, say, 17, 18 meters, that means that in that wave field, there's going to be waves. It's going to be way bigger than that. Right. They have to be.
There has to be a wave twice that.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the average of 17 meters. Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of water, man.
It is.
Okay, here's where we get to the good part.
You're on your freighter, and you're in a storm, and a 100-foot wave is coming at you from some unknown direction. What kind of things might happen?
A single large wave could put stresses on a vessel that you normally wouldn't have. You would have like just one very big wave, say, in the middle of the vessel, lifting it up, and you have 2 sides that are unsupported, putting a lot of stress in the middle.
And that's how a 550-foot-long steel ship snaps in half, just like a baseball bat over Bo Jackson's knee. How cool was Bo Jackson, by the way?
Whether or not boats disappear because of rogue waves, undoubtedly yes. Right. How often, we don't know. Sure. And whether or not all these vessels are due to rogue waves, I think that question is open.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like the mystery of the sea, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of unknowns out there still.
A curse can be a powerful weapon for those who lack power. A supernatural vow to take revenge beyond the plane we exist in. But the Bermuda Triangle isn't a singular event brought on by magic or an angry voodoo priest. It's something in the collective consciousness, an agreement made by millions of strangers as a way to explain the inexplicable. There are plausible scientific explanations for all these events that have given the Bermuda Triangle its mythical curse status. And I know I'm not smarter than those who believe. I mean, ask my 6th grade teacher, Miss Sadowski, and she'll tell you. So why do so many people believe that it's cursed when science says there's nothing special about this area?
So, Michael, I've been doing some investigation, and I know you've written about this. So, the Bermuda Triangle, what do you think?
Our brains are not well wired to understand randomness. Our brains are wired to find patterns and meaning, hidden forces at work, conspiracies, somebody is behind the scenes pulling the strings, and reproductive success is the key to evolution. So we are the descendants of those who are most likely to find meaningful patterns and infuse those patterns with agency. You know, let's look at some of these examples here.
When you set out to make a documentary, you're filled with hope that all this cool stuff is going to happen. You're going to find out that magic is real, and then you're forced to confront reality. The world K's your B, bro. And you run into that one guy at the bar, and he ruins everything.
We're looking at regional shipwreck data since 2007. And of course, you would expect, the Pacific Ocean and, the Indian Ocean and so on. But here's our triangle.
Right.
There doesn't seem to be a lot going on there, right? In other words, the number of accidents here in the Bermuda Triangle doesn't even reach this level of the Bay of Bengal.
Right.
And you know who knows the statistics? Insurance companies.
Right.
People who have to pay out if there's a crash or some kind of financial loss.
And they don't charge any more to travel through the Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
If there was something happening, the insurance companies would 100 billion trillion % make you pay more. They're not going to lose money. Like, that's not happening. There's no way.
That's right, yeah.
So the reality is crossing the Atlantic anywhere would be just as dangerous as going through the Bermuda Triangle. And yet the name the Bermuda Triangle has terrified generations of non-sailors. But why?
So where does the term Bermuda Triangle come from?
The origin myth begins in the early 1960s with an article by a guy named Vincent Gaddis in the magazine Argosy. Argosy was one of the largest pulp fiction magazines ever published. Fiction. Okay, that's it.
Right.
Pulp fiction, right?
That's your
first clue, right? And he was basing it on a Fate magazine article.
Yeah.
That referenced this area around Bermuda might be triangular, so he coined it the Bermuda Triangle. And that meme really stuck. And that's where the fantasy and imagination jumps in, especially fantasy writers. Charles Berlitz, for example, he was a very popular writer. He wrote books on Roswell. He jumped right in with the Bermuda Triangle, and that's what kind of put it on the map.
Right.
Some writers go, oh, it goes back to Columbus.
Columbus saw all kinds of crazy, those guys crossing the ocean, they saw lots.
Totally, of course, and what did they know?
Exactly.
Ask any Bermuda Triangle enthusiast, and they'll tell you that Christopher Columbus was the first person to write about mysterious forces in the Triangle. Apparently, he saw a series of lights dancing in the sky. This could be the genesis of the Triangle's larger-than-life reputation. Every curse, every myth, every mystery has a moment where it began. A singular point in the space-time continuum from which everything else follows. Was the Bermuda Triangle's moment in a place just like this 528 years ago?
Columbus. He was coming into the Caribbean and possibly San Salvador, and he recounted seeing lights hovering in the sky. In some ways, the Bermuda Triangle goes back to that story. That's the first mysterious incident.
Armchair Bermuda Triangle theorists often point to this sighting as evidence of something supernatural. But is there something else going on here?
San Salvador's got indigenous people, the Taino people,
that might have had fires on a hillside. And it's possible that Columbus mistook fires on a hillside for something else. So I think I'm gonna go up there and build a fire, and we'll pull out and see what it looks like.
It's not exactly hard science, but my time machine only goes back to 1493, and this is the best we can do.
So people, when they see something they don't understand, they make up a myth. Mythology, superstition, and curses are ways of dealing with uncertainty. It's the Bermuda Triangle. Weird stuff happens here. But it could be that Columbus just saw something as simple as this. You know, a fire on a hillside. So we'll take a boat out and look back at this and say, would you have been fooled?
So we're not exactly sure where Columbus was when he saw lights in the sky. And anyone who says they know for sure is full of it. And a sample of 10 articles about Columbus sighting will give you 10 different interpretations of what happened. But that's irrelevant, because even though that event is pointed to as the origin of the Bermuda Triangle's supernatural power, the point isn't to perfectly recreate a well-documented historical event. It's to see if Columbus's mysterious light could have been caused by something extremely unmysterious. That's a word, by the way.
That's the fire I said earlier on the hill. Columbus has done the unthinkable. He's crossed the ocean. He's been at sea for months. He was all the way in the Caribbean, even though, you know, he thought he was in Indonesia. And he sees lights floating in the sky.
One man's sighting of lights in the sky is another man's proof of the supernatural. But this happened 500 years ago, so it's probably worth asking the question, what did Columbus actually see? Well, his journal says it looked like candlelight rising up and down. Look familiar?
When we run out of rational understanding, when we can't explain something to ourselves, we look for causation. Quite possibly Columbus was just so fried, and it had been so long that he couldn't see what was there. He might have seen what is behind me right now. For a lot of people, that's where the Bermuda Triangle myth starts, all the way back to Columbus.
He was lost, and something as simple as some indigenous people starting a fire on a hill could be the origin of the Bermuda Triangle. Columbus jotted it in a journal, and then people played the telephone game for 5 centuries. The lights in the sky, the promise of land in the distance, turned into indisputable evidence of the supernatural for those who wanted to believe. Occam's razor says that the simplest explanation is usually correct. And yet, when it comes to catastrophe or death, the terrifying unknown, we rarely accept the low-hanging fruit. If ships disappear, well, maybe it's aliens. When planes disappear, obviously there's a vortex to another dimension.
Hey Sam, it's Nate. We were able to ID that plane we found, but it's not from Flight 19. Turns out it's a different World War II era plane. It's a bummer, but the search continues.
All right, so we didn't solve a 75-year-old mystery in the 2 weeks we had to film this show. But still, when it comes to the Bermuda Triangle, there is no curse. If there was some statistical, measurable impact, then we would see it in insurance rates and maritime practice and in government orders. Believing in a supernatural stretch of ocean is a little like believing in the Easter Bunny. And we want magic in the world. We need it. If some older kid tells your toddler the truth about a certain magical holiday, you get enraged because the world is a better place with magic in it. The curse of the Bermuda Triangle is a sociological construct, not a marine confluence. And in some ways, it speaks to man's need for myth, for gods, for devils, and for the unknown to remain unknowable.